The state of the nation is bad. In fact, there's so much tension in the country today that there's no other way you can describe the state of the nation. Raila Odinga has given a 14-day ultimatum that without the president acting in matters of lowering the cost of living, there will be mass action. Already even before that, businessmen in Nairobi, small traders, have threatened to hit the streets in demonstrations. We have had similar action in Gatondo, in Eldoret, and this is likely to continue. So even before we hit the mass action, before that mass action button from Raila Odinga, there's so much tension in the country that I invite the government and His Excellency the President to do everything within his power to reduce the tension in the country. First, by playing the right politics. When the opposition talks of mass action, demonstrations and meetings, do not dismiss. Do not say you are not Cerelac babies. Do not say, as Gachagua would put it, you are sons of Mau Mau. Do not say, mnaona mimi ni mtu wa kutishwa. That's not the time for now. This is not the time for that. This is the time for the country to come together and for the president to show he's the bigger brother. This is the time to take a hard look at the reality on the ground and not to engage in cheap politics and chest thumping. This is not the time for impunity. There is so much tension in the country, understandably so. Aside from the millions who feel the election was stolen, who may have decided to move on, and who have now been brought from their slumber by the call from Azimio for justice. Aside from those who are pained and annoyed and angry that the election was stolen, the rest of the country is in pain.
We at Nairobi Review appreciate the support you have given Herman Manyora's YouTube channel. Through your financial support, we've been able to reach millions of Kenyans and produce quality content every single day. It hasn't been easy, and therefore we appreciate you for subscribing, sharing, and watching us every single day. Whether you're a long-term fan or just discovering this YouTube channel, your financial support can make a huge difference. You can M-Pesa us via 0768 074 076 or use till number 964 4543. That is 0768 074 076 or M-Pesa till number 964 4543. We highly appreciate your support.
The prolonged droughts, carcasses of animals dying from drought across the country, even in places where animals have never died from drought. The high cost of fuel, diesel, petrol, that makes everything else impossible. The high cost of electricity and water has gone up. The punitive taxes and more are being contemplated. The push to collect more taxes in what could amount to harassment of traders. Parents who have not been able to send their children home to school by government's own admission, over 200,000 of those to transit from class 6 to the CBC junior high school have not joined school. A country where for the first time, students being admitted to university are not taking up their places in numbers that are noticeable. The country is hurting. There's anger in the country. There is tension in the country. The Raila ultimatum of 14 days may lead to situations that are not desirable. But I see we are headed in those kind of directions. This, therefore, in my humble opinion, is not the time for the government to show they are strong. A government is as strong as the people would want it to be. The modern state is weaker than society. The Constitution of the Republic of Kenya gives the power to the people themselves. I had an argument with two friends of mine recently who think the demonstrations, the mass action, would go nowhere. In the president's own words, wataandamana watachoka. But the question I ask, what would government do in the face of 30,000 demonstrators? In a country with so much tension, the head of state has a responsibility to bring down the tension. Even if doing so may, in the eyes of foolish people, appear to be weakness. But the president has a responsibility to hold the country together. And therefore the president must play the right politics. Talking to the opposition, not necessarily for a handshake, is not a bad thing. In an article I wrote on our website, Nairobi Review, I sadly note that this shaking of hands, not for an Usumkate government, but for Kenyans working together, may not be forthcoming. First, the president is firm, and he says he's tough. He says he cannot budge. He says the others are pushing for a handshake, and they will not get it. On the other hand, Raila, who is always amenable to handshakes, to negotiations, to putting the country first. He did that with Kibaki and with Uhuru. People have misinterpreted that to mean he's power hungry. But he did this to save the country because he's a statesman. That same Raila has been let down by institutions he fought so hard to put in place. By people including foreign governments. That the Raila we have today is not that Raila who will be willing to go on table. And therefore, a president who is obstinate, who is not willing to talk, an opposition leader who has nothing to lose, I can see disaster. I appeal to these two gentlemen to think about country. The greater responsibility is on the president. When the history is written about how a promising country went down, they will say it happened during the reign of William Samoei Ruto. A footnote may mention Raila in the context of the country going down. The responsibility therefore up to the president, not to listen to people around him, but to know it is time to sit down with the opposition and talk about this country. I'm convinced that discussion cannot go in the direction of the president vacating State House. And therefore anything below that can be put on the table for discussion. The president must therefore play the politics right to avoid the catastrophe I'm seeing. I invite politicians who are neither Raila nor Ruto, who are neither Azimio nor Kenya Kwanza, who are not in the mix, to stand up and help save this country. I invite religious leaders that this is the time not to do the sort of things I saw at Bomas, but to stand strong in the manner of Alexander Muge, in the manner of Bishop Okulu, Olang, Bishop Gitari, Archbishop Ndingi Mwananzeki, Reverend Njoya. The proud has in our history stood with the people and made this country proud. The church has saved this country. Time has come when I invite the church, civil society, independent-minded politicians and leaders to come together and stand between these two gentlemen who could send our country to destruction. I must remind the president that the modern state is weaker than society. You can imagine Raila swearing in. If that crowd marched to State House, God forbid, what would you, as an Anselak DP, do? What would you do as a DP who is son to a Mau Mau? What would you do? As a president who cannot be pushed, what would you do? These are very serious questions you must answer. Do not give yourself imaginary powers which you do not have. As we urge Raila and Ruto talk together, we are equally aware these two may not talk. I invite people to read that article in Nairobi Review, why Raila may not shake Ruto's hand. I invite serious Kenyans to come and save the country. But then, even before that, it is so easy for the president to diffuse the tension. First, play the politics right. Secondly, Mr. President, and I must address you, because I love this country. And I know you have the power to diffuse the tension. Today, if not yesterday, Mr. President, bring down the cost of living. For once, and for good reason, look at the IMF in the eyes and the World Bank and tell them, I will not watch as my people die. Tell them you are a Christian and God commands leaders to take care of those under them. And that in obeying the scriptures, you will not let the people of Kenya die under your watch, Mr. President. Look at the cost of electricity. Look at the items that read like literature. Remove some of those levies, some of which don't even make sense. Face the cartels in the energy sector. Independent power producers, those in the electricity supply chain, KPLC itself. Face the cartels, smoke them out. End corruption in Kenya Power. Bring the cost of electricity down for consumers and for manufacturers. You cannot talk of industrialization in this country. You cannot talk of manufacturing in this country with the cost of electricity being where it is. Look at the cost of fuel, bei diesel, petrol. Look at the levies and taxes. Remove some of those that don't even make sense. Bring down the cost of fuel. You cannot talk of manufacturing business in this country with the cost of fuel being where it is. You cannot. You have to bring down the cost of diesel. Only then can we talk of manufacturing in this country and bring peace to households. This the president can do by ignoring bad advice. I suspect I could be wrong. That advice could be coming from IMF. What the president should actually do yesterday, bring down the cost of unga. Do so by introducing subsidies that are necessary. I don't support subsidies, but sometimes you have to do with evil to solve a problem. Ensure the implementation of the subsidies is better than we have witnessed before, but bring subsidies. The price of unga is climbing up with all this drought and nobody knows when the rains will come. Mr. President, listen to me. I'm a humble citizen, but I do know the things I ask the government to do today to bring down the cost of living, they will end up doing them anyway, but under duress. Do today that which you will end up doing when you are on your knees. Do it today with dignity. Save the country from demonstrations, which you rubbish. Save the country from mass action, which you rubbish today, but which will put you on your knees and you bring the cost of living down. Remember, if you look at history, it could be too little, too late. What the government ought to do today is to figure out not how to complain, not how to blame anybody, but how to bring down the cost of living for the people of this country. Even as together as a nation, we find ways of navigating through the hard times, because hard times lie ahead. And those hard times will require that every citizen of this country supports the government in going through those hard times, in sacrificing. But how will the people sacrifice when the government had the power to reduce the pain of cost of living? The government looked the other side. The government went to bed with other people. The government must bring down the price of unga, but not as I suspect, because millers have been offended through some queer tendering, that some buccaneers, some brokers have been given the right to import maize duty-free, then to sell them to millers. Why don't you give this to millers direct? Millers are annoyed. I suspect and I hear the government will now bring processed maize flour and it will be GMO. Government should not bring death to its people. Governments should exist to bring life, hope and future to the people, and not death and destruction through processed GMO unga. That we cannot allow.